Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a concept related to the political philosophy. The concept or term is called as pluralism and hyperpluralism. So what are pluralism and hyperpluralism? What do they actually mean and how these help us to live peacefully with diversity? That is going to be our subject of discussion today. So first of all, to give you an idea about the concept of pluralism, from where this pluralism word has come, let us try to understand this. So the pluralism is something whose history can be traced back to the ancient Greece, and it was there where it was first of all recognized as an essential element of the democracy by the philosophers of ancient Greece, and today it is studied in the form of a political philosophy. It suggests basically in simple terms, if we try to explain pluralism first, it simply means that all of us humans, we can really and we should actually focus on living together and just getting along with each other despite of all the diversities, despite of all the differences, despite of all the contradictions we might have with each other. Now, if you talk about the pluralism in the modern context, largely it is studied from the perspective of the government. So, if you take a perspective of the government, pluralism can be defined as the anticipation that the government has that in that particular political region, people coming from diverse background, people following different religious and cultural principles, they can have different interests. This interest can be related to politics, this interest can be related to culture, this interest can be related to the following one's own religion. People having different belief system, people having different type of lifestyle, whether it is the choice of food, whether it is the choice of dress, whether it is the choice of living one's own life, people have different belief system. So the government has this anticipation that people will coexist peacefully and will be able to will be allowed to participate in the governing process. That is in essence what we can call as the pluralistic principle. The number of competing interest groups will be allowed to share power. That means power will not be captured by a single individual or by the group of individuals having similar belief system. Rather, people having competing interests, people having diverse interests, they can also have the share in the power. And this is something that is very well reflected in the system of government, where we have the parliamentary system of governance, especially where the leaders are elected, the member of parliament is elected from diverse background, from different regions, following different kind of beliefs. The most extreme example of pluralism, however, can be seen in such countries which follows the pure democracy, and pure democracy means where the citizen themselves, where the individual themselves, they are allowed to vote on all laws and even court decisions. That means where the jury is used to give verdict when the cases are brought to the court. Such regions where the voting on all laws is not done by the members of parliament, rather by the citizens directly. And this example of such democracy you can see in the Scandinavian countries, which are also in other way referred as a direct democracy. If we talk about a history of pluralism in the context of modern politics, we can trace it back to the President of USA, James Madison. James Madison was the 4th President of USA, and due to his stellar contribution made in the Constitution of US, he is also referred as the father of US Constitution. And it was he who has discussed extensively about the pluralism and its role and importance in the democracy. So while referring to the pluralism, he said that pluralism is something that US will have to follow, otherwise the factionalism due to absence of pluralism and the inherent political infighting that would ensue would fatally fracture the American Republic that has developed just now. We are talking about the time when America just got independence on 4th of July 1776 from the British. And thus he argued that only by allowing different competing factions, different competing groups to participate equally in the decision making, to participate equally in the sharing of power or in the functioning of government, could this dire result be avoided. Which dire result? The result where the American Republic will not break down, will not be fractionated. However, pluralism can be further traced back to the 20th century England. The argument for modern political pluralism has actually emanated from there. And in this context, the growing tendency was observed by many political philosophers and economists, especially the liberal economists of that time, who observed that as a result of industrialization, as a result of modern industrialization, we can say the people are becoming more isolated from each other, and this is a direct result of unrestrained capitalism which has been developed, which has grown due to the industrialization. So they underline the social qualities of diverse yet cohesive medieval constructs which used to exist in the medieval times, that we have trade guilds where people from different vocational background used to have membership, whether they are carpenters, whether they are blacksmith, whether they are goldsmith. Similarly, villages where people from diverse background used to live together, used to participate with each other in cultural and social domain, and also universities where students from diverse background used to study together, intermingle with each other. So though these institutions are considered to be the medieval constructs, the political philosophers as well as the economists at that time believe that they will help in fighting the ill of the industrialization and the resulting capitalism. So thus pluralism, through its economic and administrative decentralization that it tries to achieve, could overcome the negative aspects of modern industrialized society. That is why pluralism was promoted as a major political philosophy in the 20th century England as well, and that is when we can understand that later, before USA also, the founding fathers of USA also have talked about that. Now this is about the political pluralism or pluralism in the field of politics. Pluralism is something that is also given importance when you're talking about the cultural sphere of people's life, and a condition in which, what is cultural pluralism? If we try to define it, it is defined simply as a condition in which minority groups can participate fully in all areas of the dominant society, while at the same time they are also able to maintain their unique cultural identity. That means participation in the full participation in the dominant society should not come at the expense of losing their own identity. That is the crux of cultural pluralism. So the characteristics of cultural pluralism, we can define it in the way of where different groups, they are tolerant of each other and coexist without any major conflict, while minority groups are encouraged to retain their ancestral custom. Now this custom is something that can be customs of language, whichever languages they are speaking. So they have full right, they have full freedom to basically make sure that their language remains intact. This can be about the dressing sense, this can be about the food sense. So all this collectively is part of cultural pluralism. Now in the real world, when you talk about when can we ensure that cultural pluralism is basically facilitated, this can only happen if the traditions and practices of the minority groups in a particular state, in a particular nation, are accepted by the majoritarian society. Not only that, in some cases this acceptance must be protected by legislation. That means the government also has a responsibility and role to facilitate the protection of the customs of the minority groups, and this can be in the form of civil rights law. In India, many such laws have been enacted which guides or which takes its guidance or inspiration from the Constitution of India. One of the major pillars of Indian Constitution is promoting pluralism in India, whether it is in the political sense, whether it is in the cultural sense, or whether it is in the religious sense. In political sense, the voting right granted to each individuals of India who are above 18 years of age or who are of 18 years of age is the best example of political pluralism. Then the next phase of pluralism or next type of pluralism which we have to discuss is in the sphere of religion, which is referred as religious pluralism. Religious pluralism exists when adherents of all religious belief system or all religious domains are existing harmoniously in the same society. Now this is something that differs from the freedom of religion that is ensured in many democratic societies. So what is religious pluralism and how it differs from freedom of religion? Let us try to understand this as well. So if we talk about the freedom of religion, this basically is talking about the steps that the governments have taken, steps that the what we can say legislation has taken, legislature of the this country has taken to protect the people who are coming from the minority religious groups, and this protection is ensured by formulating civil laws. And on the other hand, when you talk about the religious pluralism, it does not talk about the government's role. It talks about that there is a voluntary interaction between the different religious groups with each other, and all the religious groups then derive mutual benefit from this interaction. In other way, freedom of religion basically connotates a kind of mandatory protection guaranteed by laws. On the other hand, religious pluralism is a voluntary in nature. The example of this we can understand from this particular case study. Let us say on a same road in a same region, we have an Orthodox church, we have a mosque, we have a Hispanic church, and we have a Hindu temple, or anything you can add. So if they are existing in the same street, this basically shows the diversity that you have in that particular area. But it only converts, or it only becomes religious pluralism if the different congregations, whether they are from mosque, whether they are from the temple, whether they are from church, are engaging with each other and interacting with each other without any force, without any sanction of law. So that is how we can explain the difference between the freedom of religion and religious pluralism. Also, religious pluralism can then be defined from this example as defined as respecting the otherness of the others. And freedom of religion then encompasses all religions which are acting within the law in a particular religion. That is how briefly we can discuss the differences between both. Now in recent times, in modern times, one extreme form of pluralism has started to raise its head, which is referred by political scientists as hyperpluralism. So what is hyperpluralism? Hyperpluralism is basically a theory of government which describes that when a large number of different groups, large number of different factions became so politically influential that they are able to influence decision makings of the government. So if different factions are trying to assert their dominance in the government decision making, it largely leads to inability, where the government is not able to function properly. And this can be described by a simple diagram or image that you are seeing from here. This is, for example, let us suppose a government, and different factions, different groups are pulling the government in multiple directions. Thus, it leads to a situation of what is referred as gridlock or deadlock in political decision making. So, hyperpluralism is considered to be an exaggerated, or in one way we can say it is the perverted extreme form of pluralism. Perverted why? Because it basically has a negative connotation, negative ring to it. Thus, hyperpluralism tends to result in legislative gridlock, in executive gridlock, and it prevents or slows down the implementation of major social policies which can be beneficial for the citizens of that particular country. So in this context, hyperpluralism, basically some of the scientists also believe that it has some positive notes as well. So let us try to weigh the pros and cons of it. Now if we talk about the pros of hyperpluralism, obviously it offers a greater sense of civic activism, because if a group of people feel threatened, or a group of people feel that a certain decision of government is going against them, they can actually protest, revolt, not revolt is not right word, we can say they can protest against the government and they can try to raise their voice against the government action. So this is the best example of civic activism. Secondly, a greater influence of public opinion can also be made by hyperpluralism. And third, when several factions, several groups are able to raise their voice, and not only raise their voice, when they are able to reach to the government officials, public officials have better information that what is the demand of citizens, what is the concerns of the public, and then it can help or transform into better decision making, better public policy making. However, many political scientists argue that the positives of hyperpluralism are far outweighed by the negative impact that it has, and it has on democracy and effective, efficient functioning of government, negative effect is more predominant here. So what are the negative impact or the cons of what we can call as the hyperpluralism? Let us try to have a look at that as well. So if you take a look at the cons, obviously hyperpluralism can result, and generally it often results in legislative gridlock that prevents or slows down the implementation of major social policies. Second, it can create an uneven distribution of socio-economic power that can result in cases of social inequality. Third, it allows some groups to enjoy more political power and social choices than the other groups. That means it is promoting political and social inequality in the democracy. And last but not the least, it also promotes economic inequalities, because if hyperpluralism is prevailing in any democratic setup in any nation, generally what we see that such groups which are wielding more wealth, which are wielding more influence, they vis-a-vis the groups having little wealth and influence are able to exert and assert their dominance more on political decision making. That means in one way we can say, in the modern context, hyperpluralism generally leads to the profit or benefit that is given to the rich classes, influential classes or capitalist classes. On the other hand, the classes which are having low amount of wealth, which are lying in the lower economic strata, they are not able to reap any benefits out of it. That is all about this particular video. I hope you understood about the concept of pluralism, hyperpluralism, what is the pros and cons of both in the modern day politics, modern democracy. Thank you very much.